Your Lending Era, the podcast where we dive into the world of residential, business, and commercial finance, bringing you expert insight, tips, and strategies to help you navigate the intricate landscape of lending in Australia. I'm one of your hosts, Jessica, and in today's episode, we're going to chat about one of our favourite little sayings, and that is timing is everything. Here with me today, we have David Thomas.
Hey Jess, how are you?
Hey Dave, I'm well, and Hope Westbury.
Hey Jess, hey everyone.
Hi guys. So let's chat very broadly for a second here. Why do banks hate anything changing in our personal lives?
Well, look, broadly speaking, it's because banks, and we've chatted about this before with the 5 C's of credit, they look for consistency in what you've been doing, right?
Yep.
So part of what they do is they look back over your last 6 months or 12 months to see what kind of character they're looking at there. You know, how often do you change jobs? What do you spend your money on? What does your family structure look like and all these things? And then they make a judgment on that as like a snapshot in time. What you have done is what you will do in the future. Mm-hmm. And that snapshot, they're looking for confidence in that to decide on, how much they want to lend to you in the future and, the decisions that you might make. Yeah. So that's why they look for that real consistency, because it gives them good confidence that you're going to make good decisions in the future. And considering they probably owe you, or you owe them the largest amount of money in your entire life, that's why they're looking for that consistency. They're looking for that comfort before they lend.
And there are some banks as well that are looking for less consistency than others, and they're happy to take on, more level of risk than like more of a mainstream lender.
Okay. Now, talking about the consistency that banks do love, I know there are a few variables that we see quite a bit that I think a lot of clients should probably consider when they're looking to dip their toes in, per se, and look at buying a property or refinancing or getting an investment property. And what are some of the things that you would always recommend clients start considering?
So it's always a case of kind of, Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to end up, with your life journey, having a family, maybe upgrading a house, maybe, doing extra study, exiting the workforce, going to retirement. So it's really a case of, thinking about, okay, well, I've got all these life journey things that are coming up in the future, and how do I plan for them? And then how do I plan for them in a way that it doesn't look bad when I go for, future lending? So.
And how do I position myself as strongly as possible to tick off each of those different life events?
Yeah, correctly. And how do I time all these things together so it all kind of flows?
Okay, so off that, Dave and Hope, what would you say would be some of the most important things that you should be considering before applying for finance?
I think something that's relevant to a lot of really young Australian families is welcoming a new family member and planning to expand your family. And me, myself, I went through this recently in the last couple of years. I knew that I was going to be taking some time off work, therefore my income was going to be reduced, but I still wanted to live really comfortably during that time and just enjoy my baby. And it was such a big lead up to, for my family to plan for that. So one of the main things that I wanted to do when it come to my home loan is I wanted to refinance before I went on to mat leave, and I wanted the lowest possible interest rate at the time so that my repayments were nice and manageable during the time that I was going to be on a reduced income.
Yeah. And as the family grows, you've got to do that for the first child, but then, how does the second child or third child fit into this? And how, as those children get older and we've got childcare to consider and, as an added expense, and we've got, private school fees, or we've got, sporting travel and all of these kind of things, just think about how that is going to slot into your finances over the next kind of 15 to 20 years.
And banks are quite sophisticated in the way that you put that child's age in and they have a discretionary allowance for that child based on the fact that that child's 8. They probably don't have braces yet, but as soon as they're 13, they're thinking perhaps this child has braces.
You're right. Banks collect so much statistical data through people's bank statements that they know what's going to happen in your family probably before you've thought about it, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's just like common sense. If you've got a 5-year-old, well, they're going to be off to maybe a Catholic school or a private school. If you've got a 12-year-old, they're going to go into high school, and if that's private, then that's going to be more expensive. If you've got a 16-year-old, you're looking at, higher education fees, for as they go off to college. So, and then, as you've got an 18-year-old, are they paying for the child to be at uni somewhere else in a remote location, living on res, all that kind of stuff. So, it's a long journey, but banks hold a lot of information on it, and they know what your up and coming costs are going to be.
And I think post-Royal Commission as well, we saw banks including, so typically you would say that child is 18, they're no longer financially independent of their parents. But I know that a lot of the banks now have a category specifically for children over the age of 18. Because these days, how many people do we know turn 18, finish school and move out of home?
This is one thing that I found really interesting when I moved to Australia, because in New Zealand, when you're 18, you're gone. But I found that when I moved to Australia when I was 21 and entered the workforce, a lot of the people that I was working with still live with mum and dad. And that was a really foreign concept to me. Now we're sort of fast forward 10 years and the cost of living's a lot higher as well. And we've done a previous podcast where, we maybe suggested living with friends or family for a bit longer to try and save some more money. I think that that's becoming a lot more relevant post-COVID.
Yeah, the bank of mum and dad gets leaned on a fair bit more than it used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it does come down to the cost of living and things which we've spoken about before and we'll speak about quite frequently throughout this season. But let's also talk about some other things that may pop up. I know that this is one we get quite a bit, and that's unexpected large cash purchases.
Yeah, so these are things that don't fit within the normal bell curve because they're completely discretionary. And the number one is family cars.
Yeah.
And then how that family car is purchased. Is it purchased with cash through redraw of the home loan? Is it purchased through savings? Or did we take out a car loan for it? Or the sometimes the most evil one, did we take out a lease for it?
Yeah.
So obviously we're in Canberra. We're surrounded by public servants and PAYG IT contractors that all have been sold the benefits of salary packaging a vehicle. But those salary package leases are really, really expensive on a monthly basis and really do hamper borrowings.
Yeah.
So,
Which a lot of people don't realise.
No, because they come in and they say, yeah, but I'm getting a tax deduction and
My expenses are paid for.
my expenses are paid for. But what we need to just remember or remind people is the total cost of running that car is clearly written on your payslip and clearly comes out of your income before you can spend money on anything else, including food and home loan repayments. Yeah. So they really do put quite a big dent there. So it's important to time that, around your bigger borrowings.
And I know, for example, we see it every now and then where a client will potentially have a car on order, so they've got a pre-approval for that lease. And it will still pop up on your credit file. So even if you haven't taken it out, the bank will see it and kind of smell a rat in the room and need to know what that is. So there isn't necessarily any way to get around, pulling something over the bank, that they're going to find out. So you've just got to consider, is it the most appropriate time to be doing this, or should I focus on a larger goal for now?
Yeah, and I always think, the houses, the real estate, the investment properties, that's your larger goal. Never, ever put a vehicle or a tax deduction in front of something that will make you a large amount of money over a long period of time.
And talking about a large amount of money, I know one that, David, you in particular, you've got a lot of clients in this basket because you're like a self-employed nut of the office. We have a lot of clients who will say, come in to meet with us and they've got $300,000, $400,000 in the bank ready to go. And there's often the misconception that they can use that all.
And especially if they are in a self-employed upward trending business. So when you're in a self-employed upward trending business, you have your first really good year and it's an absolute cracker and you've got so much cash in the bank and you've gone to do your tax returns and your tax returns show this really strong income and you know that the same is going to happen next year. And you get all enthused and you're like, you know what, I just make up a number, $500,000 for the year. I'm going to go and buy myself an awesome house because my business is finally established. But what you forget is when you've earned $500,000 for the year, your looming tax bill is circa $200,000, right? And if you've got $300,000 in the bank because you've had an awesome year and $200,000 of it belongs to the ATO, then that's something we're going to have to plan for. you
Yeah.
know. We can't go down putting $300,000 deposits on houses when 200,000 of it is going to be due to the ATO in April.
Yeah,
So-
and banks are quite sophisticated again because they've dealt with hundreds and thousands of borrowers in this space that they know when tax bills are due. They know when one's about to pop up, so they'll just cheekily ask for a BAS statement here or there just to say, "Oh, can you meet the commitment?" And truly, there's nothing worse to a lender sometimes than seeing someone on tax office managed payments.
Yeah, so and that usually happens when you have overspent that big profit that you've got because you haven't correctly accounted for your tax and you haven't started to structure or work with your accountant to go, okay, what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah.
So that person that does have that, they're finally that good year, there's a few things that's going to happen. They're going to do their tax returns. Then they're going to have to, pay their fair share to the ATO for what was the previous year. And then the ATO is going to say, hey, these profits are going to continue to roll in. We need you to start making, quarterly payments for provisional tax on top of your BAS and on top of your PAYG for your staff. And so a lot of these clients that do have that big year and that big tax bill, they will then find themselves in a situation where they're still got to pay the tax for the previous year. They've got to pay the tax for the year that they're in, and they've got to pay their tax for their normal, trading. So it becomes a bit of a rude shock. So I usually say to clients, look, let's clear the tax, get it up to date. The bank's going to know what to look for. They're going to look for BAS statements to make sure that they're all paid. They're going to look for tax portals for your company, for you personally, for your trust. So we need to get these things squared away.
And that's why it's so important that you do have, and we've spoken about this heaps before, you've got a really good accountant, bookkeeper and broker around you to forward plan for this kind of stuff, because there's some people that wouldn't even think of it, I don't think, if they haven't seen a lot of it.
Yeah, so it really is a sequence of earn the money, pay the tax, then do the borrowing.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And now another topic that we see a little bit that sometimes people don't consider until they're already pre-approved, and then we get like an email at 3:00 on a Friday saying, hey, would this change things? And that is people either entering new employment, changing career paths, or reducing their employment to study.
So if you have a current pre-approval, that's based off your circumstances as of basically that day, off the pay slips that we've provided to the bank, and that's how, your income's been verified and they have predetermined that, yes, you could borrow X amount of dollars. If that changes for whatever reason, then obviously we're going to need to redo the numbers. I would strongly suggest that you don't get pre-approved, change your job, and then go and buy a property and then surprise us on Monday and say, oh, by the way, actually, I've decided to, have a career change and I'm earning 20K less a year, because that could severely impact that specific finance application.
And I think the misconception is sometimes people will get a pay rise and think, wow, this is great. This has solved my problems. Generally, it doesn't. It creates more than it solves in the short term. In the long term, yeah, you're definitely better off. But until you've generally got kind of 3 to 6 months worth of new industry, employment history and salary credits, it's kind of null and void to a bank.
It's actually wild to me how often this happens, though. Like a lot of times we do have pre-approvals for a client and then they come through and say, oh, I've changed jobs or I've done this. And I don't think that they realise how much of an impact that can actually make on the application. But it definitely does happen all the time.
Yeah, we've got one at the moment. We've got a lovely young applicant who's, a tradesman. He had a steady job. We did a pre-approval, didn't really borrow him enough for what he wanted to purchase. Another job opportunity came up, so he kind of moved over because the new job has prospects of a lot more overtime for weekend work and things like that. And he was like, this is awesome. I'm going to earn an extra $20,000 or $30,000. And what we found with that one is he then has to work, 3 months in the new job to open up just 1 or 2 lending options. And they weren't, that wasn't suitable for him. So now he's had to work another 6 months in that job to give us a 6 months year to date to show all that extra overtime to be able to go and get that pre-approval. So him changing jobs has kind of pushed his purchase back nearly 12 months. It's really frustrating for him being a first home buyer. But this was just, prior planning for him would have been better. But, we're working through it at the moment.
And as Jess said, like long term for that guy, that's great. It'll definitely work out better. But if you're in the midst of a finance application, it's probably not ideal.
Not ideal.
No, it's not the best thing to see. And let's touch a little bit on, we see it quite a lot here, particularly because we've got a few universities around us here in the lovely sunny capital of Canberra, and that is re-entering higher education.
Yeah. We see this more often than you would think because of, obviously we're surrounded by unis, but also we've got clients that are, always wanting to study and improve themselves. So obviously what happens then, it's actually twofold, and quite often clients will come to us and say, hey, I'm doing this study and then I'll be able to earn this income. But what we need to remember is when you are doing the study, most likely your income will drop. And then congratulations, when you finish your study, you've then got a HECS debt, which means you've then got payments on the HECS debt from then on. And the payments are calculated on your income at the time.
Which is potentially increased.
Which is increased.
Hopefully.
And therefore your HECS debts have increased. So we just need to always kind of factor that in with what we're doing. And it's like most events, if you're going to do borrowings, get that sorted, and then go and do the study.
And once you've done your study and then you've acquired your HECS debt, and then, there is no guaranteed job offer on the table straight away either.
Yeah.
So that's a consideration to make as well.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I suppose if you're going to look at changing career paths, jobs, employment, or doing more education, probably put a back burner on your loans. If you're not going to do them ahead of time, you need to be realistic in saying, I'm going to put this on hold for 12 months, I'd say at least, to be as responsible as you could.
Yeah.
You can't always have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to decide what is more important and just understanding, if you're going to quit your job to go and do some study, well, that means borrowing's off the table for a bit. If you're going to, go self-employed, well, borrowing's off the table for a bit, so.
Yeah.
And if you do have current borrowings, obviously you need to be really responsible in the fact that if you do have current lending, you've got mortgage commitments to make, and you do drop some income to go and study, you need to be able to still carry that level of debt while you are studying.
Yeah, because nothing's worse to a bank than seeing you've missed a payment.
Yeah, correct. And or put your payments on hold for a period because you'd had a life event such as study or whatever, because they will just see whatever you've done before, you're going to do that in the future.
Yeah.
So, if you flippantly put your payments on hold, they're going to think, maybe this is a client's going to do this in the future again.
And it is reflected on your credit file too. A lot of people think that if they do that it's not going to impact them because the bank told them that it's not going to. It will be reflected as non-payment on your credit file.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't say you're 6 months late, it just has a payment pause, which is unfortunately not pretty either.
No, it's not.
It's a glaring red flag.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about something that we've all got to look forward to one day. Dave, you're definitely a bit closer than I am.
You're up, mate.
But that is retirement. So how should you be considering retirement at any stage when you're looking at a funding application?
Well, look, as you're right, I am a lot closer to this than you guys are. So what we need to do is just remember that, as we were talking before, everyone falls within a bell curve, right? So sadly, if you're my age or older, expect a lender to take your retirement into consideration with what they want to lend you in the future. And a bank will be looking for mitigants of, okay, if you are going to borrow 45 or 55 or 50 plus, and you want a 30-year term loan, they don't want you having the money when you are 85, right? So they want to know how you plan to either manage that or get rid of it ahead of time, right? So they're looking for exit strategy is number one. So they're looking for, what other investments do you have? Do you have money in superannuation? All of these kind of things. But also they're looking for people to borrow when they can borrow and well ahead of time, right? So if your goal is to purchase a couple of investment properties before you retire, do it well before you retire, right? Don't try and get to within 2 years of retirement and think that you're going to make some investments that'll see you through your golden years, because a bank's not going to feel good about giving you a 30-year loan knowing that you probably only got 2 years in the workforce.
Yeah, and particularly on that one, we see a lot of clients, I'd say over 60 doing this. with a property strategist or someone like that who's promised that capital growth will be massive, the bank don't look at capital growth as a reasonable exit strategy at all.
No, because
It's not guaranteed.
Not all property performs in all areas 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So, and the other one that we see a lot of is people that are working with financial planners over the age of 50 and they're accessing equity in their home to go and invest in shares or something else. And that, once again, that is fine when you are 50 and you have another 15 years worth of investing in blue stocks.
Yeah.
But certainly at 62, we wouldn't want to be, or the likelihood of you getting, $300,000 approved to go and invest in the share market, having never done it before, is probably too much risk for a bank to bear. So if you do have, investment goals that you want to do that will help you in your retirement years, do them early.
Yeah, get ahead of the curve. Now let's dig down a little bit more on the specific banking approach to the timing thing. So firstly, I've heard you mention the term snapshot. Can you work us through that a little bit more?
So look, a snapshot in time is the bank can only see what is on your application that information pertains to your previous 3 or 6 months, right? And they're making a judgment on that as to what you're going to do over the next 20 years. Okay, so they're really just got like a looking glass into your life to try and make decisions that are very long-term based. And you've got to remember, term loans that we're talking about in residential space and commercial space, they're non-reviewable. Bank looks at them, makes a decision, and then hopes that you follow on your previous trends of being an upstanding citizen and make all your payments.
Yeah.
And one of the most, I suppose, controversial aspects of that snapshot in time is living expenses, isn't it?
It is, because a lot of people come to us and say, here's 6 months worth of my bank statements and that's going to reflect what I spend my money on. But when I buy my home, that's going to change.
Yeah.
Because more than likely that's not going to change. We had a conversation about this the other day, and if you move into your house and you're used to getting Uber Eats every single night, then you're not going to move into your new house and miraculously learn how to cook. It's very unlikely that that's going to change. And so we need to be careful that we are taking that into consideration. We review what you've been spending over the last 6 months, and we factor that into our calculations when we're calculating borrowing capacity, because living expenses do affect that as well. And we need to make sure that we accommodate that and the new mortgage repayment and make sure that we're still in the green.
And I think the current kind of RBA crisis and inflation has proven that is the case, because I feel like the last thing that people altered, despite the very looming crisis above them, was their spending habits. They were happy to sacrifice on, large one-off purchases, or the home loan might get a little bit late, redraw's gone. But my goodness, I do not want to stop going to artisan clinics for a facial once a month. And that's just unfortunately human nature, isn't it?
You and me both, girl.
I've stopped going to artisan clinics.
Oh, we can tell, don't we? Now, let's also talk about, I know we were chatting a little bit about planning to start or expand a family. So logistically, how does a bank consider, let's say, maternity leave?
What a bank is going to want to look for in your loan application, if you are going for a loan somewhere around maternity leave or the age of maternity leave, is what do we have in place? What buffer do we have in place to carry us through? Banks understand that if you're 29 and you got married 2 years ago, that you will most likely want to start a family in the next 5 years, and they're going to give you a 30-year loan. But what they're looking for is, if you have a period of lower income, or no income, how are we going to bridge that gap?
Yeah.
Do we have $100,000 worth of savings in the bank to carry us over? Or are we in a job that we are going to earn half our pay for the 12 months that we're there? And if we are going to earn half pay and we have, some savings in the bank, well, then that ticks the box and we can move forward with these things. But just think about how we're going to get through that period. And so long as you've put some thought into it and put some provisions aside, then, we're good to go.
Yeah. And I think the only instances where we see the maternity leave or the unpaid leave go wrong is when it is just that, and it's unpaid. So, for example, if you're a casual employee with no entitlement, then suddenly the bank might think this is a bit of a problem. So then we've just got to future plan and say, okay, well, what will you be doing at this point in your life, and try and put those steps in place so that once you get there, we can just pull the trigger on the application.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and let's talk about the policy approach to retirement and exit strategies, and what things are somewhat reasonable, what are just complete fairy tales.
In Canberra, a lot of public servants are on the PSS pension.
Yep.
So, and lenders love that because they know that it's a consistent payment up until the day you die. Is that right?
CSS is indexed,
Yep.
and PSS1 is indexed, so that you actually get a pay rise in retirement, as inflation goes along, which is great for them. And then obviously the rest are PSSAP, which is still pretty good super.
Oh, 100%. And
then-
it's superannuation paid above industry standards significantly.
Yeah.
So
And so the lender finds a lot of comfort in that because they know that it's not going to stop. So I do plenty of loan applications for people receiving PSS and CSS incomes,
Yep.
as long as it makes sense. So as Dave was saying before, we want to make sure that maybe they've got other investments they can sell when they do, decide that for whatever reason they want a bit of less debt and more money to play with, it still has to make sense. And if someone's on a different type of super that doesn't have those sort of entitlements, then that can make it a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
And I think this is one, I always say, get some advice. This is one instance where clients don't necessarily know, it's not written down what the different supers and how the banks view these different forms of, retirement income. So have a chat to someone and say, look, I'm on this scheme, what does this mean? Or this is my superannuation, what does this mean? And someone, a broker will be able to say, well, yep, this is good. No, this means this. Or a percentage of the bank will take a percentage of what you've got in super, or they'll want to see, pension paid over a certain period of time to evidence income. Like there's a lot to it. And I think just have a chat to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Get ahead of it. Okay, guys. Well, I think we've kind of covered off definitely the most important things to think about with the timing is everything saying. So with that, thanks, Dave, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jess.
Thank you, Hope, as well.
Thank you, Jess, as always.
Easy done, guys. Well, thank you to our listeners for tuning in again while we spoke through our thoughts and feelings. We always have a lot of them. So thank you for bearing with us throughout that.
All right.
Beauty.
Have a good-
Easy done. Bye, guys.
Bye.